Have you ever looked at your life, maybe at your work history, and just felt like you're operating without a script?
Hmm.
One day you're the ambitious professional and the next you're the self-sabotaging procrastinator. It feels like you're stuck playing 10 different, sometimes conflicting roles.
And trying to make sense of it all feels like wrestling with this mountain of information. You have all these experiences, but no system, no way to file them.
Exactly. It's the ultimate feeling of information overload, but it's applied directly to your own identity.
Right. You have all this raw data, your achievements, your relationships, the mistakes you keep making over and over, but you lack that fundamental unifying algorithm to make it all coherent.
And that is precisely why we're doing this deep dive today. We want to give you that algorithm.
That's the mission.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Today, we're analyzing a whole stack of sources that reveal these universal human patterns, what we're calling archetypes, and how they operate across your entire life. We're going from the micro-psychological level all the way to the macro-external world.
We're basically looking at blueprints found in three major domains. First, we're diving into the core of depth psychology, so classic Jungian theory, to really understand the internal structure of the mind.
Okay.
Second, we'll look at 9 professional archetypes that career coaches are using right now to define your work trajectory. And finally, we'll see how these same ancient patterns are, well, commercialized in branding and reflected in our modern digital identity, like in memes.
Our goal here is intensely practical. We want to give you a single comprehensive map for understanding behavior and motivation. Not just your own, but the patterns that actually govern, entire human history.
And here's the key insight that I think binds this all together for you, the listener. These archetypes, they aren't rigid labels designed to box you in.
Right, they're not horoscopes.
No, exactly. They are conceptual frameworks. They're blueprints that give immediate structure and coherence to what feel like random life events. If you understand them, it reduces that information overload instantly. Because you connect your individual struggle, your unique personal complex, to a universal ancient human history. You realize, okay, I'm not just being chaotic, I'm actually executing the script of the Mosaic Maker. And that shift, that changes everything.
To start building this map, we have to go back to the source, right? To the architect of the concept in modern psychology, Carl Jung.
We have to.
We use the word archetype so loosely in conversation, the jock archetype, the nerd archetype. But what did Jung really mean by it, and how did it fundamentally challenge psychology at the time?
Well, what's so fascinating here is that Jung just fundamentally rejected that 17th century idea of the tabula rasa.
The blank slate.
The blank slate, exactly.
Right.
The notion that the human mind is empty at birth, just waiting to be filled up by experience. Jung argued that no, we are born with these innate potentials, these predispositions that are influenced by evolutionary pressures.
So he saw these patterns not just as learned behaviors, but as like structural elements of the human mind itself. They're basically hardwired.
Yes. It's like we're born with a library already built. Experience just fills the books on the shelves.
I like that analogy.
Jung defined archetypes as universal, archaic patterns and images that are derived from what he called the collective unconscious. They are, in his terms, the psychic counterpart of an instinct.
Okay, what does that mean, psychic counterpart of an instinct?
Well, think of it this way. An animal has an instinct to migrate or build a nest. It doesn't learn it. It's just in there. Jung said humans have an innate potential to recognize a hero, to fear a villain, or to search for meaning. That's the psychic equivalent.
So the archetype itself is unconscious. It's just a potential form kind of waiting to be activated.
Precisely.
And that's why we see the same fundamental patterns, like the wise old man, the mother, the trickster, showing up in every culture, right? Whether it's ancient Sumerian myths or, I don't know, the latest Marvel movie.
Exactly. They are latent forms or hidden potentials that get activated when they enter our consciousness. And only then are they shaped by our individual and cultural experiences. They show up indirectly through stories, art, myths, religions, and dreams.
So the archetype is the deep structure under the behavior we actually see.
Yes, it reflects these fundamental human motifs, universal experiences like love, death, fear, belonging, that were developed long before language could even name them.
That makes the concept incredibly compelling, but I think we need to draw a very important distinction here for everyone listening. Jung also focused intensely on complexes.
Yes, he did.
How do we separate the archetype from the complex? Because it seems like that distinction is often where the therapeutic breakthrough happens.
That's a critical question. Think of it this way. The archetype is the universal riverbed. But the complex is your own personal eddy pool. A complex is a cluster of emotions, memories, and often painful ideas related to an individual's unique life experiences.
So like a severe trauma or a series of failures related to a parent.
Right. The archetype is the universal structure, the template for, let's say, a father figure. But the complex is the personal drama that clusters around your actual father figure, which might be filled with resentment or idolization or fear.
Ah, okay, that's the perfect distinction. So the archetypes gather around our individual life experiences to form these complexes.
And generally speaking, complexes are experienced negatively. That's why they're usually the object of analysis in therapy. They tend to stall our natural development and cause us to repeat the same painful patterns over and over.
So bringing that unconscious material, the complex to consciousness, is the whole point of depth psychology.
It's the primary aim. The universal pattern, the archetype, creates the container for the personal struggle, which is the complex.
Okay, now that we have that foundation, let's look at the three most critical archetypes that Jung said form the basic structure of the individual psyche.
Right. We have to start with the identity we project to the world, which Jung called the persona.
The persona.
He purposely used the Latin word for the mask worn by actors in ancient Greek theater. It is the social interface we adopt to navigate everyday life. We adapt to external expectations.
So it's the role we play. The professional mask, the dutiful friend mask, the competent parent mask. It's all about fitting in and, functioning efficiently in society.
Right. Consider a new father. He might acquire traits he thinks are standard for a father, being stern, maybe, or overly protective. Even if those aren't his natural emotional tendencies, he's wearing the father persona.
But here's the crucial insight from the sources, right? The persona is often a mask we wear not just for the outside world, but for ourselves.
Yes, to avoid the discomfort of our own complexity, we hide our messiness behind a polished role.
And that leads directly to what we repress, the opposite of the persona, the shadow. What happens to all the parts of us that just don't fit the mask?
They fall into the shadow. It is the archetype of darkness and repression. It covers the parts of our character we keep hidden or the desires we won't admit to having. It's our darker side.
And when we refuse to acknowledge it, that's when we project it onto other people. We see in them what we refuse to see in ourselves.
Constantly.
Can you give us a concrete example of that kind of professional projection? Let's say I secretly crave more control and power, but I refuse to admit I'm ambitious. What might I see in my workplace?
Well, if you're projecting your shadow, you might constantly complain that your boss is an arrogant tyrant. When in reality, it's your own repressed ambition and desire for control. The very traits you suppress to maintain your nice guy persona that you're reacting to. You hate the trait in him because it reminds you of your own potential or your own unfulfilled capacity for it.
Wow, that's uncomfortable.
It is. Jung considered striving to know the shadow the first test of courage in the process of self-discovery because it means accepting the unpleasant truth about yourself.
An immense challenge. So, if the persona is the mask we wear and the shadow is what we hide, what is the unifying force that holds all of this together and hopefully resolves that conflict?
That is the self. The self is the most comprehensive archetype of all. It pulls together and unites all the other archetypes, including the persona and the shadow.
And the ultimate goal of life, in the Jungian sense, is achieving what he called self-realization or individuation.
Exactly. And individuation isn't about becoming perfect or adopting some flawless persona. It's about becoming whole.
Right.
It involves attaining a balance between all the opposing forces in the personality. Conscious and unconscious, rational and irrational, male and female energies. It's the realization that you are not just the mask you show, nor are you just the darkness you hide. You are the integrated whole.
It's easy to be an archetype, as one source put it, but it's far more difficult to be a complex, functional human being.
That's the goal.
That framework gives us the map for our inner life, the fundamental operating system of the psyche. But let's be honest, for most of us, the job title is the persona. It's the script we use externally.
It absolutely is.
So let's shift gears now and apply these pattern recognition skills to the external world, specifically to our careers. We have 9 really fascinating career path archetypes identified by career coaches, and they provide a practical language for defining your work trajectory.
This is such a crucial transition because often the chaos we see externally in our careers, the bouncing between jobs, the dissatisfaction, it's simply a reflection of an internal, unrecognized pattern or an unconscious leaning toward one of these blueprints.
So applying these archetypes gives coherence to that professional chaos.
It really does.
Okay, let's start with the two paths that are most focused on, let's say, conventional linear achievement. The first is the one most of us were probably taught to aspire to, the steady climber.
This path is that methodical progression, the classic ladder climber. This is someone who prioritizes clear upward movement. Think of the person who starts as a junior accountant, moves to senior accountant, then manager, controller, and eventually CFO.
Every step builds logically and incrementally on the last one. So what's the core psychological appeal of that archetype? Why do people want that?
Stability and absolute predictability. It minimizes risk. It offers a kind of comfort in its linearity and its very clear markers of progress. You always know where you stand.
But the central paradox, according to the sources, is that stability often breeds stagnation, doesn't it?
It's the biggest risk. The existential risk for the steady climber is the fear of ever stepping off that track. And then the realization, maybe 20 years in, that they've achieved their goal, only to find out they were reading someone else's script the whole time.
Oof. Okay, then you have the flip side of high achievement, which often comes with a much higher speed, the early achiever.
Ah, yes. This person finds remarkable, often what feels like premature, success. The software engineer landing a prestigious job at a unicorn tech company right out of college.
Or the investment banker making partner by 30, the writer publishing a bestseller in their 20s.
All of those.
That sounds like the ideal, but the critique points out that this path has a tremendous hidden psychological stress.
Absolutely. The early achiever's core psychological tension is that their identity becomes dangerously fused with external metrics. The pressure to maintain that high bar is immense, and it leads to this intense stress about peaking early.
So for them, a minor failure isn't just a setback.
It's an existential crisis. It really is, because their sense of self-worth is inseparable from that initial massive win. They can become addicted to the rush of external validation.
Now we get into what I think are the much more common paths, especially today, the nonlinear ones. These are so essential for our audience, whose careers often look like winding rivers rather than straight arrows. The first is the Mosaic Maker.
The Mosaic Maker's career looks scattered, chaotic, or even random to an outside observer, and often to the maker themselves, for years.
I think a lot of people can relate to this.
For sure. They might have been a high school teacher, then worked in tech support for 2 years, then got into logistics, then became a project manager for a nonprofit. It feels so frustrating because they can't articulate the bigger picture while they're in it.
But you mentioned the magic happens in hindsight.
Yes. The unifying theme emerges when they look back and realize the pattern was about, say, communication skills, resource management, and simplifying complex systems.
And that teacher tech support project manager eventually becomes what?
An instructional designer, or maybe a high-level organizational consultant, where all those disparate experiences create a unique, invaluable, and surprisingly coherent proposition. The challenge is just maintaining faith in that coherence before the themes are obvious.
Okay, closely related, but I think fundamentally distinct, is the pivot master. We should spend a moment clarifying the difference because these two often get confused.
This is so critical. While the Mosaic Maker is largely operating on intuition, sort of trusting that the pattern will emerge later, the pivot master makes shifts that are intentional, strategic, and deliberate.
So they're moving to new, often unrelated fields, like a corporate lawyer who becomes a tech entrepreneur when they've consciously decided they've learned everything they can or optimized their network in the previous field.
That's it. So the core difference is agency and time perspective. The pivot master is proactively connecting the dots before the shift.
Whereas the Mosaic Maker connects them in hindsight. So one is acting on strategy, the other is operating on faith.
Perfectly put. The pivot master emphasizes agency and deliberate evolution. It's not chaos happening to them. It's a planned, calculated, strategic reset.
What's the risk for them?
Burnout. From the constant learning curve and the administrative overhead of rebuilding credibility over and over again.
Then you have the experience collector, which is defined less by career titles and more by the value they place on just personal exposure.
This archetype maintains a very experimental, open relationship with work. They value learning and broad personal growth over traditional metrics like title or salary.
Right. Their resume might show roles as a caregiver, a retail manager, a travel photographer, and a food truck operator.
Exactly. They aren't trying to become a CFO, and they aren't trying to pivot strategically. They are seeking breadth of life.
And what does that give them?
They develop this broad life wisdom and unique perspectives from all these varied roles. They find satisfaction in ways that just aren't legible in conventional career terms. Their psychological challenge, though, is comparison anxiety with peers who have more conventional success and, potentially lacking financial stability.
Okay, moving on to the paths defined more by purpose and mastery. The polar opposite of the experience collector, who seeks breadth, is the deep specialist.
Yes. This person finds their niche early, sometimes astonishingly early, and just goes extraordinarily deep. They focus entirely on mastery within a very narrow domain.
Like the research scientist who spends decades becoming the world expert in one specific protein.
Or the artisan who becomes the world's leading restorer of 16th century clocks. Their career satisfaction is derived purely from that achievement of mastery.
The trade-off is often narrowness, I'd imagine.
It is. While they gain incredible authority, they may face market risks if their niche suddenly becomes obsolete, or psychological risk from intellectual isolation. Their goal isn't to climb a ladder, but to descend deeper and deeper into a well of knowledge.
Next, we have the late bloomer. This archetype carries a specific kind of internal challenge, I think.
It does. This is someone who takes longer to find their footing. They often spend years feeling behind their peers, suffering from that comparison anxiety during their 20s and 30s.
But then they succeed spectacularly in careers that require things like complex pattern recognition or high emotional intelligence.
Yes, or a complex judgment that really only comes with accumulated life experience. So the slower start, while it was painful, it allowed for this deep psychological maturation that pays off later in life, often in fields like diplomacy, therapy, or high-level management.
So they benefit from a longer gestational period in a way.
They do. They finally launch themselves when they have the maturity to handle both success and failure with equal grace, which often leads to more sustainable and meaningful achievements than the early achiever.
The next one resonates with anyone resisting that old corporate model, the portfolio builder.
The portfolio builder resists a single path, but deliberately maintaining multiple, simultaneous professional activities that are complementary.
So it might be a university professor who also runs a consulting practice, authors books, and sits on corporate boards all at the same time.
Exactly. It's not about finding one primary persona. It's about deliberately constructing a blended identity.
And their success is measured not by climbing one ladder, but by achieving a personally satisfying mix of activities, impact, and income streams.
The psychological challenge here, though, is the administrative overhead and the fragmentation. Juggling multiple personas requires intense energy management and focus switching. It's not for everyone.
And finally, the path that completely redefines the concept of professional success, the life-first designer. We have to clearly distinguish this from the experience collector.
Yes. The experience collector is optimizing for internal wisdom and growth. The life-first designer is optimizing for external freedom and lifestyle.
Okay.
This person intentionally chooses work that enables a preferred lifestyle over career advancement. They measure success based on work-life integration and having energy for non-work activities, hobbies, community involvement, family care.
So someone who works seasonally, maybe in tourism or contracting, to enable extended travel or 6 months off per year, they're prioritizing the structure of their life over the size of their paycheck or the height of their title.
Precisely. The life-first designer sees work as a flexible utility, not a rigid identity container. And understanding these 9 paths is really the first step in knowing which scripts you're trying to read from, and crucially, whether those scripts align with your deepest archetypal needs.
It's fascinating how these same deep foundational psychological patterns, these universal human drives, are not just concepts for your inner life or for mapping your career.
No, they are deliberately engineered and utilized to shape identity, culture, and consumer behavior in the marketplace.
This is where it gets really interesting. Brand archetypes are essentially universal models used to create consistent brand personalities that resonate emotionally with us as consumers.
Right. A brand isn't just selling a product, it's selling an archetypal story that promises a specific kind of outcome.
And this approach works because we, the consumers, unconsciously recognize and respond to these ancient patterns in brand messaging and storytelling.
We don't have to consciously decode the marketing. Our collective unconscious recognizes the pattern instantly. It just clicks.
We can quickly categorize the 12 classic archetypes based on their core desires. For instance, you have those that seek paradise or freedom, like the innocent, the sage, and the explorer, or those that want to leave a legacy, like the rebel, the magician, and the hero. Let's run through some key examples to show how they translate into commerce, starting with the hero.
The hero is motivated to prove their worth through courageous acts and master skills to improve the world. And Nike is the classic, most obvious example.
Of course, just do it.
They emphasize courage, determination, strength, overcoming challenges. They aren't really selling shoes. They are selling the potential for you to be heroic, encapsulated by that simple, potent slogan.
So the hero sells courage and achievement. What about knowledge and reliability?
That's the sage. The sage seeks truth and understanding, valuing wisdom and intelligence above all else. Brands like Google and The Economist embody this. They position themselves as reliable, insightful, and authoritative sources of knowledge.
So they promise to educate you, making you feel more informed and therefore safer in a chaotic world.
Exactly.
And for those brands that emphasize authority and control, the ones that promise to shape the future.
That's the ruler archetype. They seek control and stability, often aiming to create a prosperous, successful environment. Think Rolex, which sells timeless status.
Or figures like Elon Musk.
Absolutely. He embodies that determination to exert massive influence and shape the future of multiple industries. They appeal to the consumer's desire for structure and order.
On the complete opposite side of the ruler, which seeks stability, you have the archetype that thrives on chaos, the challenge to the status quo, the rebel or the outlaw.
This archetype is driven by revolution and a willingness to destroy what isn't working or what's perceived as stifling. Harley-Davidson is the quintessential rebel brand.
Right.
They sell the freedom of the road, defiance, a rejection of conformity. They promise liberation from the established rules. Richard Branson, through his Virgin Group, also successfully uses this archetype to challenge industry norms.
And finally, the creator archetype, which is focused on bringing something entirely new into the world.
The creator aims to give tangible form to a vision. They value authenticity and imagination. Brands like Adobe, which provides the complex tools for creative expression, and Lego, which embodies originality and modular imagination, are perfect examples.
They appeal to our inner desire to be authentic and leave a mark.
Yeah.
And just to tie back to our earlier critique, what is the central paradox or existential risk for a brand that uses the creator archetype?
The risk for the creator brand is losing its authenticity. If they release a derivative product, or if their internal processes seem uninspired or corporate, the consumer instantly feels betrayed. Their entire value proposition hinges on genuine originality and maintaining that high standard of creative integrity.
So we see how these universal patterns are deliberately commercialized. But the use of archetypes extends beyond polished corporate branding and into our personal, digitally mediated identities.
High modernity just challenges traditional identity formations because of rapid social change and the sheer volume of information we're dealing with. Identity today is a multifaceted, dynamic construct. We're constantly negotiating who we are across multiple contexts.
And the digital age has completely blurred the online and offline boundaries, leading to what some sources call the networked self.
This is where the tension gets really high. Users curate different personas for different platforms. Your LinkedIn persona is the steady climber.
Right.
Your Instagram persona might be the experience collector, and your private group chat persona might be the trickster or the rebel. It's exhausting to maintain all these multiple personas online. It's like updating 4 different resumes every week, each with a slightly different emotional tone.
And yet, the platforms themselves often push back against total fragmentation, don't they? The sources point out that Facebook and Google now reinforce coherence by mandating real names and integrating services. They're forcing the online profile to reflect some version of the offline persona.
Exactly. The ability to use phony identities, while it was once common, is becoming less feasible in professional contexts. You're being encouraged to unify your personal archetypes, whether you like it or not.
But the most fascinating modern manifestation of collective archetypes has to be the meme. Anthropologically speaking, how does the meme function in this identity landscape?
Memes, especially for younger generations, are just crucial to identity and self-expression. They serve as a powerful medium for cultural expression, a modern digital folklore. They are instant, shared narratives.
They use humor, irony, and shared cultural knowledge to convey these really complex ideas in a way that is immediately digestible and incredibly shareable. They create an instant in-group.
And they frequently play on stereotypes and recognized archetypes, sometimes reinforcing them, like the trope of the overly dramatic Karen, who embodies a negative expression of the ruler archetype, and sometimes subverting them, like the various high expectation meme series.
So they create a sense of continuity and shared tradition.
Yes, strengthening collective identity among users with similar cultural backgrounds. They are the modern storytellers, reflecting and critiquing societal norms and values in real time. And they work because they tap directly into the collective unconscious.
We've mapped the universal mind, the external professional world, and the digital market. But now we have to return to the core of personal growth, engaging with the most challenging aspects within ourselves. This means getting serious about shadow work.
Right. If archetypes are the deep structures, we need to examine the ones that cause us the most pain and self-sabotage. Caroline Myers refers to these as the four legs of the table that support your life, the survival archetypes.
Let's focus on two particularly difficult ones, the victim and the saboteur, and try to find their constructive function. What is the positive boundary-setting function of the victim archetype?
Well, the positive function is that the victim alerts you to the possibility that you are about to let yourself be victimized. Or, conversely, it helps you recognize your own tendency to manipulate others for personal gain by playing the victim.
So when you feel that familiar victim energy, it's a siren.
It's a siren telling you that you need to enforce a boundary or take conscious responsibility for your part in the situation.
But the shadow manifestation is that classic sense of being always taken advantage of, where it's never your fault, and seeking positive feedback in the form of sympathy or pity.
Right. The goal isn't to be defined by victimization, but to learn how to handle challenges and outrun your fears. If you're trying to establish contact with your inner victim, you need to ask yourself, do I blame others for my circumstances? Do I spend time in self-pity? Do I feel more powerless than powerful?
And that feeling of powerlessness is often the necessary prelude to finding genuine power.
It has to be.
The other dark companion is the saboteur. This is the one that destroys plans before they even have a chance to succeed.
The saboteur's purpose is to help us learn the many ways we undermine ourselves. It is often triggered by a fear that derails our optimistic plans. Think of achieving a major professional milestone and then immediately causing a fight with your partner.
Or starting a new relationship only to destroy it preemptively because you imagine a painful, inevitable outcome.
That's the one. That's the defense mechanism kicking in, often unconsciously, destroying the potential good to avoid the potential pain or the expectation of failure.
And that ties directly back to how the shadow was formed, doesn't it? The entire reason the shadow exists, the reason we are often so divorced from ourselves and split into pieces, is because of unaddressed trauma.
Yes. Trauma creates psychic splits, and those rejected pieces become the shadow.
So if the shadow is created by trauma, integration must be the ultimate goal. What does shadow integration actually feel like subjectively?
Integration of the shadow is the process that expands consciousness. It releases the immense psychological energy that was previously spent fighting the shadow. Subjectively, this is experienced as a revival of hopes, a burst of creativity.
Or that profound feeling of finally living one's own life, rather than being dictated by fear.
Exactly that.
And it has a strong moral element, too.
Absolutely. It's about moving away from what Jung called omnipotent perfectionism, the persona's desperate desire to be faultless, and moving toward wholeness. It means accepting human limits, accepting your own capacity for darkness, and establishing fairer, more honest relations with yourself and with others.
I find this idea incredibly powerful. If we are unconsciously identified with an archetype, even a seemingly positive one like the hero or the caregiver, it dictates predictive behavior. It takes away our personal autonomy to make creative choices.
Yes. If you are unconsciously possessed by the caregiver archetype, you must always prioritize others, even to your own detriment. You can't choose differently. To become less archetypal is to become more conscious or more human.
So when you can observe an archetypal energy operating within you, when you can say, ah, that's my saboteur acting up again, you have differentiated yourself from it.
That's the moment of freedom. The point of inner work is to prevent that unconscious possession.
We have some fantastic practical tools from our sources for achieving this kind of rapid self-reflection. Let's share 2 structured mental exercises designed to surface core values and hidden motivations. The first is called the mistakenly held funeral.
This is a powerful, immediate reality check. Imagine you were on a trip and you were presumed dead in an accident, but you survived. Weeks later, you return home and you find the video recording of your own funeral, which was mistakenly held. You watch a loved one walk up to the microphone, your parent, your partner, your best friend.
And the prompt is, What would you love to hear that person saying about the sort of person you were? You focus on your strengths, your qualities, and the way you treated them and others.
The eulogy is the colloquial language we use to define a person's character, isn't it? This exercise provides instant, often tearful insight into what truly lies at the core of who you want to be defined by. It reveals the values you hold highest, but might currently be neglecting in your daily actions.
The second exercise helps visualize the legacy you want to leave, the 80th birthday fantasy.
Imagine your 80th birthday party. It's attended by everyone who truly matters to you, living or dead. It's a fantasy, so the perfect celebration is happening. Now, 3 different people, maybe your child, your mentor, and a close friend, stand up to make a short speech about what you stand for in life and the role you have played in theirs.
Once you imagine hearing what your heart most desires them to say, the key is noticing the feelings generated by those words.
Those feelings are your psychological compass. They tell you what truly matters to you and, crucially, what you are currently neglecting in your life right now. If you feel a pang of regret when you hear the word courage, it suggests you know you need to be more the hero archetype in your current situation.
These internal shifts in the work of individuation are rarely linear, are they? They follow a narrative structure, which brings us to the archetypes of transformation, most famously encapsulated by Joseph Campbell's hero's journey.
Campbell famously described myths as the collective dreams of humanity, which directly aligns with Jung's collective unconscious. The hero's journey, the departure, the initiation, and the return, is a universal narrative roadmap that maps the psychological process of individuation.
So integrating the disparate parts and polarities of the psyche into a unified whole.
Exactly. And the hero archetype provides this powerful reframing tool. It allows any individual to reflect on their own painful life experiences, a job loss, a divorce, a major health scare, and see it as a meaningful part of a larger journey.
It fosters resilience by framing personal struggles as part of a purposeful process, rather than just overwhelming chaos.
An archetype that perfectly embodies this inner transition is the alchemist. The alchemist archetype represents inner transformation, bridging the visible and the invisible worlds. It mirrors the wise old man and the magician, acting as a guide and reminding us that real sustainable transformation happens internally.
Turning the lead of past pain into the gold of wisdom.
That's the work.
To really drive home how these psychological concepts manifest, our sources offer some fascinating interpretations of popular culture, showing how fictional characters embody these complex mental dynamics. Let's start with the toxic relationship between Harley Quinn and the Joker.
This fictional dynamic is understood as a profound psychological archetype symbolizing folie à deux.
Which is what, exactly?
Literally, the shared psychosis. It's where delusional beliefs or even hallucinations are transmitted from one individual to another, usually in a very close relationship. The initial dynamic starts as folie imposée, where the Joker is dominant and transmits his pathology, but it transforms into folie simultanée, where Harley Quinn becomes equally psychotic and they mutually trigger symptoms in each other.
And psychologically, this illustrates the two-hit hypothesis for severe mental illness, which is a key clinical concept.
Absolutely. The first hit for Harleen Quinzel was often her pre-existing vulnerability, her dysfunctional family, and existing psychological issues, which primed her mind. The second hit was the overwhelming pervasive influence of the psychotic Joker.
Understanding this highlights the importance of preventive psychiatry.
It really does. Intervening after the first hit to build resilience before the second, often external hit, can lead to a severe psychiatric breakdown.
Another powerful literary archetype examined in our material is Stephen King's It, the entity that often manifests as Pennywise, the dancing clown. This isn't just a monster story, it's a deep trauma narrative.
It is a complex psychological archetype representing a demonic entity, child abuse, and childhood trauma. Pennywise symbolizes the abuse itself, luring children and physically eating them, which metaphorically symbolizes the psychological mutilation caused by the trauma.
Leading to inferiority complexes, emotional impairment, and the disintegration of the self.
All of it. And the cyclical nature of the story, with it returning every 27 years. That resonates so deeply with the trauma experience.
How so?
That symbolizes the re-experience of trauma with flashbacks and nightmares during stressful periods of adult life. The initial trauma remains, buried in the collective unconscious of the town, until something triggers its reawakening.
And the protagonist defeating the clown as adults. That symbolizes what?
The conscious healing of the trauma. The disentanglement of the mind knots. The complex knots of negative emotions, fear, and repression that were formed as a consequence of the traumatic experience.
That is a stunning use of metaphor. Let's look at one final pervasive archetype that has evolved in modern psychological interpretation: vampires. And we're not talking about garlic and steaks here.
No, we're talking about emotional draining. Vampires represent the instinctive fear of real vampirism, but this concept extends directly and powerfully to psychic or emotional vampirism.
So, a toxic relationship where one person drains the other's psychological energy, leaving them exhausted, demoralized, or suffering from a lack of vitality.
It's that feeling of being totally depleted after spending time with certain people. The source outlines several proposed types of emotional vampires. The classic types are the narcissist, the drama queen, and the controller.
But modern interpretations add more insidious types.
They do, like the gaslighter, who uses psychological manipulation to cause doubt and destroy the victim's self-trust. Or the interrogator, who exhausts the victim with a constant barrage of questions while revealing nothing about themselves.
And the Casanova.
The Casanova, who sexually and emotionally exhausts the victim, using their love and admiration to bolster their own egotistic tendencies.
And the victim of this type of draining relationship often suffers from what the source calls psychic energy, a lack of psychological energy.
Yes, and I can see how that connects back to the professional burnout we discussed earlier, where the demands of the persona leave no energy left for the self. The energy depletion is not just physical exhaustion, it's a psychological depletion of the will and the vital force.
Which can lead to desperate compensation.
It can. The victim might turn to excessive consumption of food, alcohol, or other quick dopamine hits to try and replace that lost psychological vitality.
We have to touch on a truly advanced concept for accessing these deep patterns, one that bridges internal psychology and external chemistry: psychedelics.
Our sources suggest that psychedelics like psilocybin and LSD may facilitate therapeutic breakthroughs by causing what's called abasement, or ego death. This is a profound experience where the default mode network of the brain, which supports our normal sense of self and defense mechanisms, temporarily dissolves.
And this dissolution effectively lowers the threshold of consciousness, allowing archetypes and unconscious material to just flow into awareness.
Which often triggers intense emotional release and deep insights. This resurfacing of unconscious material can trigger these profound shifts, often experienced as spiritual wisdom or a comprehensive realization of meaning.
But Jung himself was cautious about this, wasn't he?
He was deeply cautious. He warned that the immediate overwhelming effects on the mind meant the individual might not be mature enough or prepared enough to integrate the powerful psychic facts that were suddenly revealed. It's a fast path, but integration is always the hardest part.
So we've journeyed from the universal mind, exploring the psychic counterpart of instinct and the complex interplay of the persona, the shadow, and the self.
We then mapped 9 practical blueprints for professional life, examined how archetypes influence commerce and our digital identity, and finally looked at the hard work of shadow integration and psychological healing through the lens of these transformation narratives.
The power of this analysis, I think, is that it takes that feeling of being overwhelmed by your own experiences and gives you a lens to view your external actions and internal struggles not as isolated, confusing events, but as part of an ancient, relatable human narrative.
You now have the language to describe the patterns that govern your life.
And this isn't about finding one label and just sticking with it, is it?
No, not at all. The ultimate goal, as defined in our sources, is archetype evolution refining and channeling these inner guides to achieve true fulfillment. When you know which forces influence your choices, you can anticipate your reactions and uncover your true intrinsic motivations.
True evolution happens through action, applying the self-awareness in real-world scenarios and constantly staying open to growth.
This is the lifelong process of moving from unconscious possession to a conscious partnership with your deepest self.
So as you finish this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final, provocative thought.
Remember that archetypes and complexes go hand in hand. A complex is your personal issue clustering around a universal pattern.
Consider the most persistent negative pattern in your life today, that feeling or behavior that you fall into repeatedly. Maybe it's a tendency toward procrastination, or excessive self-criticism, or relationship sabotage. If you had to give this unwanted pattern an archetypal name, a name that reflects its deep universal nature, what would it be?
And what truth is that unwanted character, that negative complex trying to teach you about yourself that you are currently neglecting? That is the path toward the coherence and the ultimate integration you are seeking.